Aloha, everybody. This is Rhonda Abrams. I am the producer and the creator of the Web TV Trailblazers Summit. This is our second annual year, and today I am proud to announce that we have Joey Rassool. He's a director of photography, and one of his projects is Machinima's Superpower Beatdown, which is a really cool web series they have out, and if you haven't seen it yet, definitely catch it. Joey comes from a whole entertainment family, and even though he has a family entertainment, he has made his own mark in the industry. He's been known for being able to recreate styles such as Tim Burton, Jim Henson, and Stanley Kubrick, and of course he has his own style going. And a definite talent for knowing how to get the best production from the budget that we have. Hello, Joey. How are you doing?
Hi. How you doing? Thank you for that great intro.
Well, I don't want to do a long one, but you have really great stuff I could say about you. But anyway, I'm gonna let you talk about you. So tell me about Superpower Beatdown.
Well, Superpower Beatdown started with a friend of mine named Aaron Shunka, who's a director at a company called Bat in the Sun. They used to do a lot of fan films and things like that, mostly Batman-centric. And the people at Machinima came to him saying, can you do a show for us? We know we love watching the fights that you shoot with Batman and all those characters. Can you do something that incorporates more characters? So Aaron and I started working on this web series that takes two random superpowered characters, be they from comic books, video games, TV, characters that would never ever meet in the shows. They're from different franchises, they're from different genres, and we kind of match them up and see who would win in a fight. So
it's sort of like in the days when I'd be on set and people would start these random fights about if Batman and Superman got into a fight, who would win?
Exactly. So we take that and go, because something like that, Batman and Superman, is something that they'll try and do in the comics because they're both DC characters and they have the rights to use them both. But what we did was something like Superman and Thor, who never get to fight each other, who are both considered gods in their own right, and where we do Batman versus Wolverine, and our next, our biggest episode that's going to finish out this season is going to be Batman versus Darth Vader.
Oh, wow. That should be really interesting.
Yeah, that one was a lot of fun to shoot. Yeah, as much as we like doing other characters, Aaron's always going to be a Batman fan, so we're always going to bring Batman back in some way.
So how did you sell the show?
That was entirely on Aaron's side. It's mostly Machinima saying that they wanted to work with us in some way, liking what we had done in the past. I had recently started working with Aaron at Bat in the Sun, and they liked the production value that they saw of the two of us working together. And from there, they kind of said, we want something from you guys. We don't know what it is yet. And this was, Superpower Beatdown was the concept that Aaron and his father Sean came up with. And then we started shooting it about 2 years ago, and the episodes take a little while to produce, but they have an interactive element to them. We let the fans vote for who they think would win. We interview some of the fans. We go down to local conventions and talk to them about who they think would win. And then we shoot the fight. A lot of times, if the voting's really close, we'll shoot it with both endings, depending on who you feel should have won. So you can always believe what you want when you watch whichever ending.
That's excellent. So tell us a little bit of some of the favorite projects that you've worked on.
Well, outside of Machinima, I work with a event production company called Cypher Art Studio. And I say event production company because that's what they are. They're not technically a film production company. They put on the largest masquerade ball on the West Coast every year,
Wow.
and they do a lot of the event coordination for Comic-Con parties, for Machinima's parties, for the LACMA, and things like that. And they started to do some video installations in with their events. So a couple of years ago, we were doing the Halloween parties at the LACMA, the Tim Burton Halloween party, the Stanley Kubrick Halloween party, and they came to me and said, "Hey, can you make some video installations that kind of match this style? Can you match a Tim Burton style? Can you match a Stanley Kubrick style?" And that was a lot of fun for me, especially coming from fan films where you're already working to try and emulate a style,
Hmm.
and then being asked to do that again, but with a director, with a filmmaker, and emulate a certain look, emulate a certain style. So I think that is a great way to that's a great way for beginning cinematographers to learn, because when you have too much freedom, you start to think, I can do anything. Now I don't know what to do. When you constrain yourself and you say you have to do it in this certain way with this certain style, you start to grow within that, and you find out why it's done in a certain style, or what effect that style has on an audience.
Yes, okay, I can see that. And just so I just come clean, I know nothing about cinema photography, so sorry, I don't. In fact, when I've been on set, I'm just amazed at what they do, and I just get out of the way. So so as in styles, like for instance, when I'm watching TV shows, there's definitely like a style I would call a comic book style, even if it's real
Mhm.
people. Is that what you mean by a certain style?
Yeah, to a certain extent, yeah. A lot of what people think of as the style that from very specific directors can often be attributed more to the director than the cinematographer, but it's a collaborative effort between the two to get the style. And some directors are way more hands-on. They know exactly what kind of shots they want. If you look at Edgar Wright films, there's very specific, snap zooms and quick cuts, and the camera moves in very specific ways throughout all his films. Whereas there are some directors who are just focused on the actors. They want to get the best performance, and that leaves the cinematographer free to control the camera, to control the lighting, and play around in that space and take that off of the mind of the director so he can just focus on the performance. And I think it's the cinematographer's responsibility to know the difference between the two directors and come onto one set knowing that you're going to be focusing on just lighting and delivering the director's vision, and one where you're going to be building things from the ground up a little bit more and letting the work get out of the director's way.
That's really good advice to know who you're working with. That's really good
Hmm.
advice. So now on the productions you've been on, have there been a variety of budgets, or a lot of them low budget? Can you tell us a little bit about what you look out for when you're on a low budget production? How you can make that better? I think that's.
Well, so I would say a lot of them are low budget. I would say a lot of them are low budget now. Um, in that when I started out, and I looked at the budgets that I'm working with now, I would have called this, medium budget. But now that I'm working with it, I'll call it low budget. You can never have enough budget. It always feels like. But the things that plague a lot of low budget cinema um, are the amount of time that you have, the amount of anything that you have, and the size of things that you have. And there are several tricks that I kind of stick to, no matter what the budget is, to try and get a succinct look, um, when you don't have a lot of time for pre-planning, or you don't have a lot of budget for any lights that you want. You have to kind of work with a smaller package and kind of have a little more forethought. And a lot of it comes down to you just knowing what a piece of technology is doing, rather than just knowing about it. Knowing how a light works, and knowing what kind of bulbs and how that bulb is working, because what you can do with that information is you can find cheaper solutions that do the same thing. For instance, if you are using Ari makes some halogen lights that I think sell for $400 a head. They use the exact same bulb as the DIY work lights, or not DIY work lights, but workshop lights that you can get at Home Depot for about $50. And if you know how to control and shape that light using cinefoil, or building your own barn doors for it, or something like that, you can get the exact same look out of that light, and maybe even drop a Fresnel in there, and build a light that'll function the exact same way for a whole lot cheaper, because you know what's part of it.
Wow, that's fascinating. Did you have a list of tips that you wanted to share with us, or?
Well, so when you talked about coming in and talking about cinematography, I thought about what the biggest things that are problems for beginning cinematographers, and it's really when you come into a room and you look at it, you want to figure out in your brain to figure out what the image should be before your brain starts to adjust to it. It's something that colorists say a lot. When they look at footage, I think they say like a minute before their brain starts to adjust to the footage. If you have a very flat image that has a lot of issues and things like that, your brain will automatically try and start to fix that. So you have to kind of be aware of what your brain is doing and be aware of how your eyes are working.
I had no idea that process went on.
Yeah, of all the cameras that are out there, and everyone says one is better than the other. People will argue Red Dragon. People will argue Alexa. There is one camera that beats them all and has a higher resolution than all of them, and is really easy to get your hands on, and that's your eye. Your eye will always have a higher resolution, and your eye and your brain together are doing more camera work than most people ever realize. And the trick is to be able to know what your eye is doing. A perfect example is if you ever take a look at HDR photography.
Mm-hmm.
HDR photography is a process where a photo will be taken low exposure, mid exposure, and then high exposure, and they'll combine the three photos of the same image, and they'll take the lightest parts from the darkest image and the darkest parts from the lightest image, and you get a very, very vibrant image. What you'd expect would be a very flat, kind of low contrast image, but it maintains the contrast while adding information into the darks, information into the highlights. And if you look at a bunch of HDR photography, you keep on looking at it and analyzing it and seeing what's happening. And then you go outside and look at something like a tree in bright daylight that has shadows in it. And if you look at that and think about the HDR image, you realize your eye is doing the same thing all the time. You're just not used to seeing it because you're used to what a photo normally looks like. You're usually kind of translating that for you. But if you go ahead and looking very, very bright, and in the same space kind of look at something very, very dark, your eye can see detail in both of those. And the cinematographer's main job is to get the camera to see what your eye is seeing.
I see. Okay. So for beginners, that's one step. Was there another step?
So that's the first thing that you've got to really think about, as far as what your main focus is, because several times for beginners, you won't have much pre-planning time. You might get a location day of and never be able to look at it. You might have a limited camera. You won't have the dynamic range of a Dragon or something like that. But even DSLRs you can do a lot with, and it's just a matter of knowing how far you've got to go from what your eye is seeing to get the camera to be doing the same thing. So little things like your eye can pick up the detail in the shadows, your camera can't.
Mm-hmm.
So getting a little more light in that shadow, bringing that up so that you're trying to meet the camera halfway. Um, and then that's about getting the camera to mimic what your eye is doing. And then from there, that's a great basis to start with, just to get an image like what you would see.
Okay.
And from there, you can build a style on top of that.
And what does that look like, building a style?
So for building a style, I would say that there are three things that you need to think about when lighting a set: what light does do, what light can do, and what light should do. And what I mean by that is look what light does do. Look into the room directly. If you're say shooting in the living room with a window that faces out to the street, there's light coming through that window. There's light possibly coming off of a TV screen that's in the room already. See what that light is doing. See if that's something that you want or something that you don't want. See if that's something that you want to try and mimic. If you want to keep it but control it a little bit, or if it's something that you want to, like, say you have light coming from a TV. If you want to enhance light in the same spot, doing the same thing, just adding a little bit more. What light can do is all those little extra things. Say that room has a door that leads off to the kitchen. What if the light in the kitchen is on? That helps build the space a little bit more. So what would it look like if there was light coming in from that kitchen? What if there was light coming down from the stairs? It helps build the space, as instead of just the space that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
It helps build a larger world. And it's also a great beginning point for when you're working in a studio. If you know what light does do in a regular living room, and someone builds you a living room set on a soundstage, then you know what light can do in that space. You know, if you have that window and you have to build the equivalent of a sun, you can have a high sun coming in through that window. You can have a low sunset, or you can have it at night where all you've got is street lights coming through. Shooting a time of day on a stage, as long as you have 24 hours to figure it out, you can go outside and look at exactly what the sun is doing, and figure that out, and get a good idea of the look you want at any time of day. So what light can do is adding those little extra things, and then from there is what light should do, and that's what light needs to do for the style that you're looking for. If you put in all these lights, the light coming off of the screen, the window, the coming down the stairs, the coming out the door, and then you find that you've got this one dark spot right in the middle of the room that just kind of doesn't make sense, go ahead, throw a light there. There's no rules that say you can't. There's no rules that say that that's what you have to do. And bear in mind that all these things are designed to not be answers. but questions. It's not you should put a light there so that there's light coming down the stairs. It's do you want to put a light there? If you put a light there, what does that mean? I talked about how it expands the space. Is that something that you want? Is that something that serves the story? Say it's a story about isolation. You don't want to expand the space. You want to keep it small. If it's a story, if it's a nice, happy, say like a sitcom or something like that, all the lighting's nice and even and flat. Whereas if it's a more dramatic thing, you've got harder shadows. You've got a more varying color palette, and that all kind of falls in what light should do, what it should do to serve your story.
Even as you're talking about this, I'm noticing the difference of how you're lit from behind as opposed to how I'm lit from behind. I'm probably more of the sitcom value right now.
I
can see all this depth and color in the background with you. It's really neat. Even from the camera.
I have two screens up, so all the light that's hitting me is just coming off of computer monitors.
It looks good though. So you do it when you're not even thinking about it. Can you talk a little about the benefits and maybe the pitfalls of using only natural light?
Yeah, I can actually. There are times where you're stuck with only using natural light. And I'm actually going to share my screen really quickly and pull up this shot from an episode of Superpower Beatdown. This was Wolverine versus the Predator, which we had a very... I
can't wait to go back and watch all these one-on-one. I just got to see a couple. It's really a pretty cool show. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So this is a very kind of jungly look, and we were waist deep in water half the time, which was freezing. What we found was a very kind of controlled space. If you have to be outside without much control over the lighting, and you don't have the ability to bring in a big light that can contend with the sun, the best way to do it is to find the shadiest spot and shoot in the shade.
Oh, okay. That's a really good tip.
Because in the shade, everything will be even. You can play around with it a little bit more with say bounces and things like that. Here we're under a lot of tree cover, so you can see some light hitting the water. There's a couple overexposed spots that hit the banks, and for the most part we just kind of try and shoot around those and avoid those. But when the sun is pointed directly at you, you've only got one light. When you're in the shadow, you've got light coming from almost every direction to try and fill that shadow. So that gives you a lot more even of a look. And the other thing that will always help out in those situations is bounce board. Having bounce boards around will always fill in shadows and help out, and having the extra hands to come in and just hold them. And you can buy a bounce board like that, round one, for, I think that was $30 off of Amazon, maybe even $20. So they're very cheap, they're very easy. You could even go down to your craft store and get a piece of foam core, wrap some tin foil around it, tape down the edges so the tin foil doesn't go away, and just use something like that. Or a white side of foam core for a softer light. Those are the things that you should have in your kit if you're going to be shooting outdoors, say in the jungle or the desert or the forest or anything like that, where you can't have any power or anything. And if you need to create a shadow, if you have one spot in a clearing where there's just a little too much light coming through, taking something like that, holding it over the scene, is another way to really control that light. So that's what I recommend for using natural light outdoors. Using natural light indoors is much more tricky. I would say not so much natural light as practical light. If there are lamps, if there are little desk lamps, little things like TVs, and like even the little light in the microwave or the fridge or something like that. That's still more of a practical light.
That's what I have going on here. I have a halogen in front of me, and then the window, natural light to the side.
Hmm.
It's a combination that I found works best, at least in this room.
Right.
So speaking of natural light, there is a time constraint to shooting with natural light too, isn't there?
Yeah. So that's one of the things, when you going back to what light does do, can do, and should do. What light does do, if you're looking at the sun, you're looking at what it does now. You're not looking at what it does when you shoot. And if you're shooting something for 6 hours and it's supposed to be 20 minutes in the middle of the day, that sun is going to change. So you've got to make a call on whether that's going to be important to you, and you want to control that. That's another reason to shoot in the shade, because then you won't see the shadows change. If you're using a bounce, you can what you're doing is eliminating the shadows. So again, you won't see the shadows change. And the only thing that you'll have to watch out for is when you get closer to evening and you start to get a darker sky or something like that. But you can usually control from midday to sunset. If you're opening up your iris, if you're taking off NDs, you can usually get a similar look as the night gets darker. And then once you start to hit the horizon, you'll start to get a little bit of color difference or something like that. So you can usually push it a little bit, but it's something to keep in mind when planning out shoots, for sure.
I have actually noticed on regular network TV shows, actually fairly often, that sometimes it seems like it doesn't matter, because it'll be daylight and in the same scene suddenly it's dark. It's weird. Anyway.
It's a willing suspension of disbelief, I believe is the term.
It's like, wait a minute. Anyway.
There are plenty of times where I have said on set, if someone's paying attention that closely to something we screwed up on, then they're not watching the film.
Well, as a writer, this is what we say. That's what throws you out of the story.
Right.
So I've been thrown out of the story just for a moment. It's like, wait a minute. Yeah. Anyway.
But little things like, if someone's playing cards and in the next shot they have different cards, in a wide shot or something like that, and someone will lean over and be like, "Do you think that matters?" I'm like, if they're looking that hard at the cards, they're not watching the characters. And
especially
if we failed there if we
especially a wide shot. Yeah, they're probably watching it for like the 10th time, just looking for things like that.
Yeah. And you know what that means? That means you got them to watch it 10 times.
Exactly. Absolutely. So is there, okay, we had like 2 points there. The first one and then the one on lighting. Or did you have more on lighting, or did you have another?
Well, so I think that low budget cinematography, a lot of people get kind of tripped up saying, "Oh, I don't have this gear, I don't have this tech. I really want to try this look, but I can't." And they're continue on with a certain kind of style and a certain kind of look. If you want a certain kind of camera movement, say you want to have a crane move. You absolutely want to have a crane move in this next shot or something like that, and you just don't have the budget to rent a crane. That's a lot of things. That's a lot of times people kind of say that's where they're hung up. They're like, "Oh yeah, we just didn't have the budget. We didn't have these kind of things." And the way technology moves and the way things advance, there's always going to be so many different solutions that come up for something like that. When the new Movi rig came out, I think it was about 2.5 years ago now. When
Hmm.
that was announced as a $15,000 rig to
Wow.
stabilize a camera. And for the most part, I was at NAB when it launched, or was it CES? It's one of the two. But they were mostly flying 5D Mark IIIs, 1DCs. They hadn't really started to try and fly the Epic or the C300 or anything like that yet. They were still flying DSLRs. And that is when it picked up like crazy. You got this $15,000 rig that could stabilize a DSLR. And that's the part that people latched onto. Eventually, it's the larger one that can fly the Epic, and eventually they got the Movi 10 to fly an Epic as well. But nowadays, I'm going to share my screen again if I can get that to pop up. That technology has moved so quickly that a buddy of mine just bought one of these. This is a similar stabilizer rig from a company called CAME,
Hmm.
CAME, and that was under $1,000. So for the technology in 2 years has moved from the $15,000 announcement piece to this, which is under 1,000.
Oh,
And
wow, that's amazing.
it's little things like, yes, this won't fly as heavy a camera. This won't have the battery life of the Movi. This doesn't have as intuitive of software, but there's always going to be those advancements, and there's always going to be different ways to do it. And honestly, someone on a ladder with one of these
Hmm.
can mimic so many different crane moves. Or even if they're just standing on an apple box, hold it high above their heads and bring it all the way low to the ground. You can mimic a 6 foot, 8 foot jib that way, and not have to spend the money on the crane.
Wow. One time we needed a crane and I just begged for it. But we were on a set. We were at Austin Studios and there just happened to be one.
Oh
And
yeah, no. If you
yeah,
can have it, use it.
we didn't have the money, but I begged for it and they let us have it for a half hour. Anyway,
Mm,
that's another way to do it.
right.
Now, I do have a question from Matthew F. I mean, if you're ready for questions, we're about halfway
Yeah,
through, or
absolutely.
did you want to wait?
No. The questions are fine.
Oh, okay. All right. Matthew F. wants to know, when you have a lot of lights on location, I mean, a lot to get everything right, how do you hide those lights when you need to do a wide shot?
So generally, I would say when you're using a lot of lights, it's because the set is very intricate. I actually have a photo that I can pull up for this. I have
That would be
one,
great.
one or two. Um, so our recent episode, I'm only showing pictures from Superpower Beatdown that Aaron has already shown, so I won't get in trouble for
Okay.
showing these. But this is a shot from the upcoming episode of Batman versus Darth Vader. I had one of the biggest lighting packages I've ever had for Superpower Beatdown on this shoot. Um,
Was there a reason for that?
we were so excited and confident about this episode that we wanted to make sure it looked great, but
Mm-hmm.
also we were moving so quickly through the shots. We had such a crunched time schedule that I needed to be lighting while Aaron was shooting. I needed to be while he was shooting in one room, I needed to be off lighting the other one.
Okay.
Uh, so it meant that we couldn't tear down lights in one room and move them to the other. It meant we had to have enough lights to light two, sometimes three spaces at once.
Wow.
Um, and you can see between these two shots, you can see the intricate detail in this set, and that's really the main time that you would need a lot of light. And the beautiful part of an intricate set is that it hides a lot of the lights for you. I mean, this ceiling where light is coming through the ceiling, that hides that light very well. And for a wide shot in a building that is just an open space, there's a lot of times where you're going to be using one light, one very, very big light, rather than a bunch of little lights to light that. So that's what you're going to try and get out of frame. If you're trying to get things out of frame, if you're using a lot of little lights to light things, it's you usually don't want to have too many of them front lighting pieces anyway. So that's half of how they will get out of frame. Usually, if you have if you have one light that just needs to be where it is and you really can't pull it out, you can kind of work with your production designer a little bit. Maybe there's a piece of furniture that can move just a little bit to help hide it. Or if it's something that is, a face detail, like if it's a character's eye light and you're going for a full wide of the room, the eye light's not going to show up anymore anyway, so it's worth it to pull that to get the shot. And just let that be. But then also use a lot of the practical motivation throughout the space. If the light is coming from, say, overhead chandeliers or something like that, use those chandeliers in the wide, even if they do need a little bit of enhancement or they need a little bit of diffusion or something like that in the close-up. You can get away with using them bare in the wide because it helps the scene more. And then when you go in for your close-ups, that's when you can really hone that light.
Wow, that's a really good answer. I hope that helped, Matthew. I don't see any other any other follow-ups here, at least not yet. But we're on a delay here with the Hangouts, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's no problem.
Yeah, we're in the future. They get it just a little bit behind us. Okay, let's see about another question here. So if you see me looking all over the place, that's all I'm doing. I'm looking for questions.
Yeah, no problem. I thought I'd be confused by, like looking over here for the Google Hangouts, looking over here for the images that I'm bringing up. The setup that I have of monitors is so wide, I'm just looking everywhere.
Oh, okay. Here's one. When working with fuses, are there any fail-safes to keep them from burning out?
Well, that's the thing. The fuse itself is the fail-safe.
Now, see, I wouldn't even know that. But anyway, that's why I'm glad you're here.
It's kind of like how you have breakers in a house. Like, how do you get the breaker to stop from tripping? You want it to trip because that's your fail-safe. That's how you know that something's about to go wrong, and it turns it off for you so that you don't have to. So it's becoming less and less of a problem, the fuse issue with things like fluorescents and LEDs, but it is something that shouldn't be overlooked to have extra fuses on set with you in your kit. For me, I have almost always about 6 extra lights in the back of my car, no matter what set we're on, whether I told them that I have them and I'm bringing them as part of the kit or not. I usually have those in the back of my car just in case, because you always need one more. There's always going to be one that blows. And this is a tough thing. This is a thing that's very tough to explain to producers usually. If you show them a lighting schematic and you show them you need 5 lights or something like that, it's very hard to justify to them a backup until something goes wrong, and then they want that backup.
Well, of
So
course.
extra, if you own lights, have extra bulbs, have extra fuses for them. If you're renting lights, they will usually give you a big rental houses will usually give you an extra bulb if in case something goes wrong. And I mean, I can as long as you guys know how to change them, you should be fine.
Now, how does it affect what you're doing if it blows when you're shooting? Just out of, I mean, do you have to stop everything? You have to cut?
Well, I mean, it depends on how important the light is. If it's the key light that all of a sudden just disappears, then yeah, we need to stop and replace it and reshoot. I would say 9 times out of 10, it's easier to pull that light down and just replace it with another light
Mm-hmm.
and work on that light later, fix it and repair it. Because sometimes you don't know what went wrong. It could be the bulb, it could be the fuse, it could be the cable. Having a gaffer and an electrician on set that can devote time to something like that is beneficial. But if it's your own personal equipment and it's better to deal with it later and continue on with the shoot with what you have. So I would suggest just pulling the light down and replacing it with something else. And that's another reason to always have those extras, because if something goes wrong, I can always be like, well, I've got another one in my car if you want me to go grab that.
If you want to pay me to grab it. Okay.
Well, there are days where I would rather have a good project than an extra $50 in my pocket or something.
Oh, totally. So I don't know. I
'Cause
don't.
my name's going on it either way.
Exactly. On independence, things that I know we would need, and even if you can't get an okay from the producer, I just make sure they were in my car just in case.
Right.
Yeah, it's just best. And otherwise, somebody's got to run to the store, and that could be
Mhm.
miles. And
Yeah.
miles.
I mean, that's one of the benefits of shooting in LA. There are not many benefits of shooting in LA, but one of them is if anything goes wrong, there are a lot of film outlets, rental houses, stores right around town. We had a shoot recently where I packed up all my gear from one shoot, moved it over to another bag for another shoot, and realized that I'd packed the full batteries, but I hadn't packed the battery charger.
Uh-huh.
Halfway through the day, I go to my AC and I'm like, "You've been charging those batteries, right?" No, there's no charger in there.
Oh.
Luckily, we're 5 minutes from Sammy's camera, and I could just send a PA with some cash to go out and buy another charger.
You still need the time to charge it too, though, right?
Right.
Well, there's another question here. You're talking about lighting outdoors with natural light. How would you light outdoors when there's no light?
So for something like a night scene,
Yeah, I think that's what they're asking.
so first thing that I usually do is kind of try and establish a moon.
Oh, interesting.
And it's more about just kind of getting that exposure up and really getting the exposure to the area where you can at least see the faces. So very, very soft light. As much as you can make sense of where the lights are coming from, sometimes you don't necessarily need to. Your moon can be on the ground if it needs to be. Just if that's where it needs to be to fill the light. So I would say, for the most part, I go with very, very soft light through a diffusion, through a silk, 6x or something like that, just to kind of bring up the exposure of the entire place, and then think about things like street lights or any other kind of motivating lights as more hard lights. it's mainly about bringing up the exposure first, get all the lights to just do that, and then from there kind of build the practicals on top of that, like where would the street lights be coming from, and doing it that way. So yeah, I would say if you're thinking about soft lights, keep them blue, keep them moonlight, whereas your hard lights would be more like a sodium vapor street light kind of thing. And if you're out in the, say, something like the desert and you don't have those, then it is really just about, you got to think about that darkness. That darkness in the middle of the desert is so evenly, pristinely dark. There's no shadows in it because it's all shadow. So if you're going to light something, you have to light it so soft to keep that look of no shadow. And sometimes there are ways around that. Sometimes you get a crazy camera like the A7S where you can shoot in moonlight without a problem. There was a short that came out on Vimeo recently. I wish I could had a link up to it right now, but it was a short of someone walking along the beach in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., something like that, underneath a full moon, and you could see him perfectly.
Well, I would suppose you probably could with a full moon. Where do you think it starts getting difficult with the moon phases?
Well, it depends entirely on the camera. Okay. Something like the A7S you can put out there and it'll look like daylight. Something like
I noticed there's a picture of you with a red. I know they're really good with low light. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're strangely enough not the best in the world. But they have the range that can help there. With all cameras, they do have their drawbacks and things like that. It's just some have more than others. But if you're trying to do that kind of night shot with, say, like a Blackmagic Pocket, you're going to need a lot of light. There's just no way around that. You got to get them as soft as possible.
This is actually a question from me, and then there's one more audience question. I know we're getting up there to the top of the hour. I appreciate all the time you're giving us.
Yeah, no, not a problem.
Thanks, Joey. What is a good low-cost way to protect your lights if it starts raining, or if you know it's probably gonna start raining?
Okay, so
I'm just curious because I've been there and it was
Did you lose a light or two?
Huh?
Did you lose a light or two?
I think somehow a bunch of us did, like, plastic and umbrellas. I know it was a low budget thing. Whatever we could grab and still, like, kind of hold it over the light without hurting the light. But I was just wondering if you had some trick.
Well, generally, that's not so much of an issue. Those lights are pretty robust, and they're chucking out so much heat that by the time, for tungsten lights anyway, they're chucking out so much heat that by the time the water actually gets to it, it's evaporated because it's hitting.
Oh, okay. So it's not a
like
huge
a bulb or something like that. What you've got to be more careful about are the cables and the camera itself. The camera is always the biggest issue in those situations. I've had a couple times where we've had umbrellas rigged into a camera rig so that we could continue shooting. But unless it's torrential downpour, lights aren't something that you need to worry about too much. Where the cables connect, get that elevated off the ground, put it on in like an Apple box or something like that. And just make sure that the thing is that water conducts electricity, so when you are touching those lights, and if it is raining a little bit, you're gonna get shocked just a little bit. You're gonna get a little bit of electric shock. It's fine. It doesn't hurt at all. It'll wake you up a little bit. That's all.
Just a little bit, huh? I'm going to interrupt you real quick because I'm updating the web series Trailblazers
Sure.
site. Can you give me the address so they can watch Superpower Beatdown?
So you can go
I
and
mean, is there a
ahead
web
and
address or?
yeah, you can go ahead and vote for new episodes at superpowerbeatdown.com,
Oh,
or you can search Bat in the Sun on YouTube.
okay. I'm going to put down for the voting thing. Superpowerbeatdown.com, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So everybody can go vote. And okay, one more. And Joey, I appreciate your patience with me because I get these questions and because I don't really understand, your expertise here, I'm trying to figure out the questions myself. So
No problem.
this one says they want a scene. Oh, what if you want a scene that has strong colors in it and you want it to have strong colors? How do you light actors without drowning out the color you want to preserve in the scene?
So to do that practically is very much. So I'm trying to find the best way to say that because usually what you'll have is whatever light that you are shining on your actor is usually good for color, say in a background or in a prop or something like that. It usually brings out the color, and I'm not quite sure what problem you're running into there. Generally, I'd say if I wanted a very, very saturated, vibrant look, that would be more of a color correction process than anything.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be more of a selective skin tone. If you don't want to oversaturate a skin tone, but you want a very, very vibrant, saturated, say, red dress or something like that, that is something that I would leave more to a colorist in post-production and things like that. And it's something that you can learn to do very easily. At least to a certain extent, not to discredit, discount what a colorist can do for a film, because colorists can do amazing things, and everyone should have a colorist. But something like DaVinci Resolve Light is now free to use and works with any kind of footage. And if you can use that to isolate a specific color, or isolate a specific color range, or you can use it to track someone's face and omit your changes from their face or something like that, and build a look that way. It takes a little getting used to, but it's totally worth it to learn everything that can be done in a computer. There are amazing people out there on YouTube that can make beautiful pieces for almost no budget because they've taken the time to learn the software, and they're directors who happen to be visual effects gurus, or they happen to be they're amazing editors or amazing colorists or something like that.
So
and that
they're
is
really into it.
Yeah, that's production value that you can add to your project without actually spending more money on each individual project. Yeah, you spend money on the software, but you use that on every project. That it doesn't become a cost for the individual project, and it's something that whether you're doing a 3-minute sci-fi short with lasers or a feature film, you still need to buy the same program. And if you're going to do it yourself and you have that skill, then you can give yourself time for free. It's very hard to get someone else to dedicate that time to your project for free, but you can always do it for yourself. So I encourage people to learn those kinds of things, because even when they do step into a larger production where you have a post-production team or a post-production house, you can now communicate to them knowing that software, knowing the techniques, and knowing the terminology, and that helps tremendously with conveying your idea for what you want the piece to look like.
Well, Joey, this has really been some excellent tips, and for sure I've learned a whole lot through all of this, for sure. Do you have any last thoughts of what you might want to share? There's about 5 minutes here left, if you're so inclined.
Um, I guess the one thing that a lot of people do get a lot of people talk about when they talk about different projects is it comes down to when someone asks about a project that you're doing or you just finished shooting or something like that. This is something that comes to cinematographers a lot, but I'm sure it comes to directors and producers and things like that. Someone asks, "Oh, what did you shoot it on?" Like that has some kind of grounding, and that I
Oh,
feel like you
like
can
what kind of camera did you use?
yeah, like what kind of camera? Like
Yeah.
did you shoot it on red? It looks like like you shot it on red. That just means it looks better than you'd expect from a DSLR. And there are plenty of projects that I know that have blown people out of the water that have been shot on smaller, lesser cameras. So to any producers out there who are looking to hire DPs and things like that, take a look at the work. Take a look at the work. Take a look at what they can do with less. You give most people an Alexa or a Dragon or something like that, you can get a pretty decent image without knowing much of what you're doing.
Uh-huh.
If someone can get a great image out of a DSLR or even one of the old 1/3, 2/3 sensor cameras like an HVX or something like that, that's more impressive than having shot with a red. Getting a good image out of a T2i, getting a great project out of a T2i, they can always. I mean, there are tons of manuals and things like that to teach someone how to use a red or something like that. Experience with a certain camera is nowhere near as important as experience fixing problems. With a lesser camera, you have more problems to fix, and you get better and better about fixing those problems. That's why when I've had a couple film students and things like ask me, "Oh, what camera should I buy? My school only has DSLRs, and we have to shoot everything on those, and I really want to buy, an FS700 or C300 or something like that with my school money." I was like, "You're already spending so much money on school. Use the T2i, use the 7D, because you can see when you make mistakes. That's more important than anything. It's harder to tell when you're making mistakes when you have a camera that is trying to fix those.
Right. So you're really not learning a craft, basically. It's better to learn on something that's going to show you where you've gone wrong. So you know how to correct it, and then you can basically learn how to do it on anything someone gives you to shoot it with, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I just did a project where I was working as an AC again because they were working with the digital Bolex, a camera that is very unique, has its quirks, uses a very, very small sensor, is very temperamental to work with on set, but there are 350 of them in the world.
Oh my goodness.
And they have such unique problems and such unique quirks. They deliver a great image, but it's such a different camera to work with that I was so excited to be part of this crew because I knew we were going to face problems that we don't normally have to deal with.
And there's not really anybody around the corner you could ask.
Exactly. So if I have to run into that problem later on, with a camera down the line that is built in a similar way, or even with the digital Bolex again, I now I know how to do it because I've learned to deal with those problems. every camera has their problems. You know, the Reds have actually a lot of problems. The Alexa has its problems. Um, there's no perfect camera except for the two that you've got inside your head. Um,
The eyes.
and even those are autofocus. So
Well, this has been wonderful. Joey, I am really, really honored that you came by to spend so much time because I know you're busy. You're like really busy. I mean, are you working on something like currently this week, or is it still Superpower Beatdown? Or
I just finished up a shoot yesterday. Actually, I don't know how much I can talk about it,
yeah,
but
okay.
I would say just follow me on Twitter. I actually only just started on Twitter, so I'm going to be posting a lot more.
Give us
Uh,
your Twitter handle.
yeah, it's really simple. It's just at Joey Rassool.
Oh, okay. Sort of like mine, just my name. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
no strange spellings or anything.
nope. Except for the strange spelling that is my last name.
So Joey, Joey, Rassool, or is it Rassool? Rassool.
Rassool. Yes. Rasssool.
Oh, yeah. Double L. And check out Superpower Beatdown. Um, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
All
Check
right.
out Superpower Beatdown. And if you want to vote for the characters, go to www.superpowerbeatdown.com, and then you can vote there. And to find the show, just search for. What are we searching for on YouTube? Go ahead again.
The channel is called Bat in the Sun.
Okay, Bat in the Sun. Anyway, thank you, everyone. And we have one more day in our 10-day summit. We've had some wonderful guests. And Joey, thank you again. And we're saying good night.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.